Today, I just found out that old hat hunters don't like guys like me. I'm new to hunting. I've never done it in the past. Parents didn't hunt. No one in my family hunts. No one in my family even owned guns up until a few years ago. And coming back from a hunting trip today, I drove down to Kentucky, tried to do a little bit of deer hunting. The person I was with, they're like, you should listen to this podcast that Steve Rinella did with his brother. It was a couple years ago, and they kind of talk about public land hunting and all this. And his brother's got some interesting opinions. And so I, dropped them off, and then I've got an hour drive back from Cincinnati up to Dayton, where I live, and I'm listening to this podcast, and Matt Rinella is going on and on about how social media influencers and the like are ruining hunting, and how he hates new hunters. And then he goes under this circular argument of it's okay to have new hunters, but we need to be at 50% of the population hunting. And I found that interesting because I was sitting there thinking, like, I knew when I started gaining an interest in hunting that hunting as a sport or a hobby had been on the decline since its heyday, right? And it just got me wondering, well, how many hunters were there back in the day? Well, fortunately, because of social media and the internet and videos and things being so quick at your fingertips, I was able to look into some of this stuff to see if Matt Rinella is just another grumpy old man who's upset because maybe the hunting wasn't as good as it once was or something. I really don't know. I've got some info. I'm pulling it up. I want to make sure I get some of my numbers correct here. There's a nice little chart. Here we go. Back in 1960, there were approximately 14 million hunting licenses sold in the United States. The most recent data I see is from 2022, 15.9, just under 2 million more hunters since 1960. I wasn't even born until 87. I'm almost, 38, so I'm pushing on 40 here. He's probably not too much older. He probably wasn't hunting in 1960, would be my guess. He was probably really young. And he would like to see about 4 million people less than when he was growing up and hunting. I bet you his heyday was actually 1982, when there was actually 16.7 million hunters. So 800,000 more than there are today. So it's peculiar that he would say that the hunting population needs to be halved when he's never lived in a time period where that number existed. In other words, so if we're at 16 million today, we should be at 8. In his prime, it was double that. And I'm new, right? So maybe there's something I'm missing here, and there's some things I want to go over because I'm trying to logically think through this, not just be jealous of another guy, Steve Rinella, who happens to be his brother, is what it sounds like. He's just jealous of the dude and is making up things to, justify his jealousy, is what it sounds like. So that was the first thing I looked up. I was like, well, if you have to buy a license, that was going to be easy to find, right? And it was. 1960, 14 million hunting licenses were issued. Fishing license, 19.1 million licenses were sold. There was a surge, and it pretty much plateaued for fishing at 30 million in 1982, 32.2 in 2021, which is the peak fishing year, and it's slightly down by 2022 at 31 million. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is that the population has basically more than doubled. So the size of the population is pushing close to 340 million people now. Back in 1960, the population was about 180 million. It has doubled since then, right? So 1960, with 180 million people in the US, just a 13.5% change in hunting licenses sold from 1960 to 2022, and a 62% change from 1960 to 2022. But you have an 84.4% increase in overall population. As a percentage of the country, there are fewer hunters. As when you look at the peak year in 1982 for hunting, there's still fewer hunters today than there was back then. So what is the issue with overcrowding? I'm not going to pretend to have the exact answer, but I've got some better responses than social media influencers and people who like to use social media and new hunters like myself. It's just, I don't want to pull up the data here, but how incredibly arrogant that if you didn't hunt from the day you were born, you shouldn't hunt today. Like, such a silly notion and silly comment. The next thing I Google, I was like, population grew. That probably means we needed more houses and things like that. I wonder how much public land has decreased since 1960. And when you look at that, the U.S. has lost 16.43 million acres of public hunting and fishing land in 22 states due to landlocking. This is a result of the land ownership puzzle that has developed since the founding of the Western states. Continue on here, and this doesn't include just hunting, but I think it's a total of 24 million acres. I think the federal government has unleashed or returned to the private sector also since then. Not all of that was hunting. According to this quick Google search, about 16.43 million acres of that was public hunting and fishing. So I think that also explains partially why there might be some overcrowding. Now, I'm in the Midwest. I'm based out of Dayton, Ohio, but I've gone hunting pretty much between Dayton and Kentucky. When we go down to Kentucky, we actually got a little bit of private land that we're trying to hunt. I'm actually going to make a video on that and kind of go over my deer hunting experience there. But I have maybe seen a handful of people to the places I've gone. When I do go hunt public lands closer to my house, it's usually like squirrel hunting is what I'm giving a go right now. But, you know, it's deer season. I'm going out there and I'm going for squirrels when I'm not going down to Kentucky, and I'm not seeing people. I did see one group of people kind of camped out in a valley the last time I went, and then the time before that was probably the very first time I ever went hunting. So I've probably gone, 20, 30 times now, and I've only ran into people. I'm sorry, there's about 2 months ago, I think I ran into some. So I think 3 out of like the last 20 to 30 times I've gone, I've bumped into people, and it was really a non-issue because it's really coming and going. So like as I'm leaving the parking area to go and find the spot that I want to go hunt, I watched a couple of these podcasts later this afternoon. I guess there's issues in a lot of these Western states and lotteries and things like that I really don't even understand. And I get that. And there's probably better explanations other than Meateater is a TV show and podcast. I asked Grok, which is X's version of ChatGPT, I said, if licensed hunters have not increased since 1960, why do some areas have issues with overcrowded of public hunting locations? And my first thought was a decrease in public lands, and that is pretty much, I think, the first thing it says. It says, firstly, while the number of licensed hunters hasn't grown significantly since 1960, the distribution of these hunters has shifted. Urban sprawl, in other words, developing old farmland. So in conjunction with, I forgot to mention that, in conjunction with the shrinkage of public lands, you also have the erosion of farmlands and private land that was used for hunting in what ended up being urban sprawl in the creation of the suburbs through the 60s all the way up to present day, which is why you should be a YIMBY. You don't know what that is. It's a yes in my backyard. As an explanation, just quick sidebar, there's a development that wants to add 300 houses in a much more confined area than our existing neighborhood. It would butt up right next to it. My neighbors don't want it because they want to see this small, I don't know, 30-acre farm or whatever stay. But here's the thing. If you don't cram housing into existing locations, you then have to go and urban sprawl even further and continue the erosion of rural land. So, in my opinion, yes, in my backyard, put more housing here so we stop destroying rural America and we can keep public lands public, try to add on to them, acquire more from a federal standpoint, state standpoint, and let's not see the erosion of farms, which also provides access to hunting and the like. If you're not happy with the state of available land to hunt on, and you also don't want an apartment built in your suburban area, you're part of the problem because you want them to go build it on unbuilt land. And not building's not a choice. So you either need to urbanize your suburbs or you need to continue the erosion of public and private land for more expansion. There is no don't have more babies option. You have to pick one. I'm almost willing to guarantee the people who complain about not having enough space for hunting are the same people who would complain about a development being built in their beautiful suburb. Urban sprawl and expansion have reduced the amount of accessible private land for hunting, squeezing more hunters into the remaining public spaces. So you have a shift, right? So urban sprawl, suburbs go up where there used to be, wooded lots and private land that was just privately owned, raw land. And now those hunters are now displaced, have to go to public hunting grounds. Secondly, access to public lands has become a bit of a cosmic joke, even though I didn't say that, the AI did. Even though the numbers of hunters is stable, the areas where hunting is allowed have not expanded proportionally, leading to a concentration of hunters in these spots. Some states have less private land open to hunting than before, thanks to changes in land use and ownership. Think of it as the universe decided to shrink your favorite planet's hunting grounds and didn't tell you. That's probably the biggest contributor right there, is that at the federal, state, and local levels, the way that they have the rules and regulations and the uses for land and what can be done, what they would like to see be done, is probably a bigger contributor than someone making YouTube videos. And I think the data supports that, because the percentage change of public land from 1960 to today is significant. And then if you even look at the landscape change of the United States from 1960 to today, is drastically more different than the actual number of hunters, because both have actually gone down. So the number of hunters is actually down, percentage of the population, and it's a subtle increase since 1960 and a decrease since 1982, but land is being eaten and gobbled up by developers. And I think that's a bigger issue, or just people who buy thousands upon thousands of acres out west, and then they can landlock people out of public areas, which you would think you would just use eminent domain and be like, no, you can't do that or whatever. But I'm not as familiar with that. That's just my quick thought. And then this is another one I was thinking of, is your ability to become educated. And this is what people don't like. You have a sweet hunting spot. You have a sweet fishing spot. I get it. Like, I wouldn't exactly be on here going, oh, you need to go to these exact coordinates because this is where I'm able to get, right? You find it, you keep it to yourself. I think that's a general rule of thumb, right? Maybe if it's a really good buddy, you can ask, but I think it's kind of expected. Like, people aren't just going to come out and go, hey, park at this access spot and then trek 3 miles north, 1 mile this. People aren't going to do that. But that's the next point. It's technology and social media. Hunters now have apps and online communities where they share their favorite spots, much like how why is this space related? Oh, SpaceX. Share coordinates for the best black hole views. This has inadvertently led to more people flocking to previously less known public hunting areas, causing overcrowding. And I get it. You have someone like Steve Rinella come into your town, go, dude, this was sick for mule deer or whatever. And now all of a sudden your place that was little known is got a flock of people coming to it all the time. Unfortunately, with technology, your edge of knowledge is quickly decreasing. I say this all the time in the used market. Oddly enough, I like antique furniture. I like mid-century modern furniture. If you see something on Facebook Marketplace, if you see something on eBay, you see something online at an online auction, heck, you can barely go to a garage sale anymore and find a piece of furniture that you like and get a steal, right? It can still be done, a lot more work, but here's the thing. Knowledge is free and it's accessible to anyone and everyone. So yeah, unfortunately, the way information travels these days, you got to be tight-lipped, and you would hope that maybe some of these influencers wouldn't be sharing these locations, which maybe removes your little sanctuary. Does it suck? Sure. Would it annoy me and frustrate me? Sure. Would I then turn around and go, well, now I don't want any new hunters? No, I'm not a baby. Grow up. Like, it's not your land. If it was yours, you could just tell people, hey, come here. So, and I get it. That's more of a wealth issue. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. Like, literally. Like, you're not paying for the land through taxes, you are. But unfortunately, you just don't get to dictate that. One thing that I have heard often in some of these areas that are a lot more vast than regions like here in the Midwest is that you can still find good hunting spots on public land that are not as crowded, but you got to be willing to make the trek. And honestly, like for me, that's kind of why I got into it. I like the idea of getting as far away from everything as possible and just being in there with nature. So I don't want to park close and then have like a 30-foot walk to get into a deer stand and then, shoot a deer and then climb back down and then stuff in my car and be on my way. Like I'm new, so maybe I shouldn't have that big of an opinion on this, but like it's what I'm doing right now. Don't get me wrong. You got to start somewhere. I'm trying to make sure, I learn the basics, but my ultimate goal is not to do super easy stuff. And I'm not knocking you if you do. If your primary reason for hunting is because you want to get the meat and you want to use that to feed your family, that's cool. I'm not knocking it. And I want the meat too, but I also want the challenge. I know there's people who are going to think, well, I used to not have to walk a mile. Well, be thankful you can now. I don't know. So trying to bring it all back in, because I don't want this just to be a gripe about people who are griping about new hunters. But being upset because someone also wants to enjoy a hobby or a sport, however you view this, problem isn't that. The problem is what's happening at a federal, state, and local level, not what YouTubers are doing and the like. I get it. That's the visual you get, right? Maybe you get curious and you're like, well, why is everyone coming to Dayton, Ohio to shoot, I don't know, fox squirrel or something? And maybe I Google it. I see Steve Rinella just released his newest YouTube/podcast, whatever the heck it is. And it's right here in Dayton. So I just blame him. It's like, they're not attracting that many, and if you look at his body of work, really the numbers have gone down since people like him have come to the scene. The peak was in 82. There's not an upward swing here. There's no hockey stick effect because of social media influencers and the like. Now, there are some influencers that it's just not my cup of tea. Like, if you're going out to hunt just to shoot something, that's not my thing. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to knock you for doing it, I suppose. As long as you're following the rules just like I am, there's nothing to gripe about. But this idea that social media influencers are the problem is just ridiculous. And I think when you listen to Matt, he doesn't articulate anything well, really, at least not in that. He did another one with the episode's called The Dark Side of Hunting Media with Matt Rinella. And then he goes on and he's complaining again about social media influencers. But the only reason why I know he's doing that is because he's on social media talking about hunting. this notion that because you show a dead animal, like your little trophy kill, right? If you show people what it is that you got on your hunt and put it on YouTube, he says that's the problem. Government made that illegal, and they still talked about hunting, and they did entire episodes, which I've watched actually, on what to look for when you go deer hunting or when you're trying to scout to find out where to put your tree stand and all this. Like, there's no differentiating factor on whether a dead animal is on your YouTube video or not. That's just him trying to rationalize why it's okay for him to be on social media and talk about hunting, and because he's been hunting forever, why that's all okay. But it's not okay if you're new and then you like to show people what it is that you got while you were on your hunt. It's just a silly argument. It's like is it a straw man? I don't know. But it's one of those fallacies. But I just found that out, and I thought it was super interesting, so I wanted to come on here and just rant about it. And there's no dead animals on this because I didn't get anything on my hunt today, which sucked. Stay tuned for that video.